Oakwood Pines used to be the kind of neighborhood people wrote about in brochures. Quiet streets lined with perfectly trimmed hedges, friendly waves exchanged across picket fences, and a community where the loudest disruption was the occasional dog barking. It was the perfect place for someone like me, a writer looking for a peaceful life to raise my two kids while I worked on my novels. But then, Karen Whitmore happened. Before we get into the full chaos that unfolded, I have to know, what's the wildest neighborhood drama you've ever witnessed? Have you ever had a run-in with someone who just had to control everything? Tell me your stories in the comments. I'm always blown away by the creative ways people deal with situations like this. Let's hear it. Your story might even give me some inspiration for my next adventure to share. At first, she seemed like just another friendly neighbor, but we quickly learned otherwise. Karen had opinions about everything, and she didn't hesitate to share them. If someone left their trash bins out too long, Karen was there. If a kid rode a bike too fast, Karen would chase after them, clipboard in hand, scolding them like they'd committed a federal offense. Our peaceful little oasis soon turned into her personal kingdom of order. And just when we thought things couldn't get any worse, the second Karen arrived. But I'll get to that later. Let me first introduce you to the original Karen, the one-woman wrecking ball of our suburban harmony. To say Karen Whitmore is into everyone's business would be an understatement. She's like the neighborhood's self-appointed sheriff, prosecutor, and judge, all rolled into one. I learned this the hard way a month after moving in when she knocked on my door, clipboard in hand, and informed me that my lawn wasn't uniform enough. Apparently, I hadn't mowed it diagonally like the other neighbors did. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. She once scolded the Johnsons across the street for hanging colored Christmas lights instead of the classic white ones she deemed more tasteful. "This is a neighborhood, not a Vegas casino," she told them, shaking her head as if they'd brought shame to all of Oakwood Pines. And then there's the infamous grill incident. Poor Tom, 2 houses down, decided to host a summer barbecue. The smell of burgers and ribs drifted through the air, drawing neighbors out of their homes, until Karen showed up. She marched into Tom's backyard, claiming his grill violated some non-existent open flame rule. She called the fire department, and while no violations were found, the party ended with Tom apologizing to her for not being considerate. Karen doesn't just stop at enforcing her imaginary rules. She has a knack for creating chaos wherever she goes. She once reported a neighbor's teenage son for disturbing the peace because he practiced his guitar on the porch. Another time, she left anonymous notes on people's doors, warning them about the danger of leaving Halloween decorations up past November 1st. Everyone knew it was her because she used her signature stationery, pink paper with a monogrammed K. For me, her crowning achievement came when she found out I was a writer. "Oh, how fascinating," she exclaimed, not even waiting for me to respond before she started critiquing my career choices. "You should write a memoir about this neighborhood," she suggested with a grin. "People would love to read about how to live properly." Karen Whitmore is the kind of person you avoid at all costs, but avoiding her is nearly impossible. She thrives on confrontation, and she always seems to know when you're breaking one of her imaginary rules. But just when I thought she had reached her peak, the winds shifted. A new force entered Oakwood Pines, a rival Karen who wasn't just as meddlesome but organized, and that's when things got complicated. The arrival of Karen Jensen was subtle, almost too quiet for a neighborhood used to Karen Whitmore's dramatic flair. She moved into the corner house with the manicured lawn, perfectly symmetrical flower beds, and an air of authority that felt deliberate. It wasn't long before Karen Jensen made her presence known. She attended her first neighborhood meeting with a clipboard in hand and a binder full of color-coded tabs. That should have been our first warning. "Hi, I'm Karen Jensen," she began with a practiced smile. It's wonderful to meet all of you. I've been part of homeowners associations in my previous neighborhoods, and I'd love to contribute here in Oakwood Pines. I've got a lot of ideas about how we can keep this community thriving. The room buzzed with polite murmurs. Most people were too busy avoiding eye contact with Karen Whitmore to realize the threat looming before them. But I knew better. I'd seen the signs. Karen Jensen didn't rush to take over the HOA, not at first. She started small, showing up to every meeting, chiming in with helpful suggestions, and volunteering for committees no one else wanted to touch. Before long, she'd charmed her way onto the HOA board as the Community Standards Chair, a position no one even knew existed until she nominated herself. Her first act? Introducing the Oakwood Pines Aesthetic Guidelines, a 32-page document outlining her vision for the neighborhood. It included rules like all front doors must be painted in one of 3 approved colors: timeless taupe, elegant sage, or classic cranberry. Outdoor furniture could only be made of wrought iron or tasteful teak. Grass could not exceed 3 inches in height, or homeowners risked a warning letter. Most of the neighbors begrudgingly accepted these changes, too overwhelmed by her relentless attention to detail to argue. But there was one person who didn't accept it: Karen Whitmore. It was only a matter of time before Karen Jensen and Karen Whitmore collided. The first skirmish happened during an HOA meeting. The tension in the room was palpable. It was a battle of 2 Karens, one a strict enforcer of order, the other a self-appointed guardian of neighborhood freedom. "You can't just waltz in here and change everything," Karen Whitmore shot back, standing to her full height. "This neighborhood was doing just fine before you showed up with your binders and rules." Karen Jensen raised an eyebrow. "Fine? This place was a mess. I'm bringing structure where there was chaos." "Oh, please," Karen Whitmore snapped. "You're just another busybody trying to control everyone else's lives. Newsflash, you're not the queen of Oakwood Pines." "And you're not its savior," Karen Jensen retorted. "Maybe if you spent less time complaining and more time contributing, this neighborhood wouldn't need someone like me to clean it up." The room erupted into a mix of gasps and awkward coughs. Most of us sat frozen, torn between amusement and sheer terror. It was like watching 2 storm fronts collide, chaotic, destructive, and impossible to look away from. But this was only the beginning. The 2 Karens quickly escalated their rivalry. Karen Whitmore started going door to door, rallying neighbors against Karen Jensen's rules. Meanwhile, Karen Jensen doubled down, issuing official-looking notices for every minor infraction. Trash bins were tagged, lawns were scrutinized, and door wreaths became battlegrounds. The neighborhood was divided into factions: Team Whitmore, who wanted freedom from HOA overreach, and Team Jensen, who believed in organized perfection. As the conflict grew, so did the absurdity. Karen Whitmore started organizing backyard protest parties, complete with illegal lawn ornaments and music past curfew. Karen Jensen, in response, began patrolling the streets with a measuring tape and a clipboard, taking notes like a general preparing for battle. For me, it was chaos. I tried to keep my head down and focus on my kids and my writing, but living between these 2 Karens was like living in a war zone. Every day brought new drama, new rules, and new reasons to wonder why I ever thought Oakwood Pines was peaceful. And the worst part? This wasn't just a battle for control of the HOA, it was personal, and it was only getting started. My 2 boys, Jake and Lucas, were your typical suburban kids. They loved their skateboards, bikes, and the simple thrill of racing up and down our quiet cul-de-sac with the other neighborhood kids. The sound of laughter, skateboard wheels clattering, and bikes skidding was like the heartbeat of Oakwood Pines. Or at least, that's how I saw it. Karen Whitmore, of course, saw it differently. "This is not a skate park," she snapped one summer afternoon, clipboard clutched tightly in her hands as she marched toward the group of boys. Jake had just landed a pretty impressive ollie on his skateboard, but Karen didn't care. "You're scratching the pavement, making noise, and terrorizing the neighborhood." "Karen, they're just kids," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "They should be at the park, where these kinds of activities belong," she retorted. "This is a residential area, and I will not tolerate hooligan behavior on my watch." Jake muttered something under his breath that I pretended not to hear, and Karen gave him a death glare. She spent the next week sending HOA emails about the dangers of unsupervised skateboarding, complete with photos she'd taken of my boys and their friends. The neighborhood kids nicknamed her Skate Karen, and while I tried to be diplomatic, it was hard not to feel resentful. Karen Whitmore's war on kids having fun felt personal, and it turned our cul-de-sac into a no-fun zone. Then came Karen Jensen, with her perfectly manicured lawn and disarmingly sweet demeanor. At first, I thought she'd be another enemy of the kids, but to everyone's surprise, she took the opposite approach. "I think it's wonderful that these boys are so active," Karen Jensen said one day, watching from her porch as the kids skated and biked. "Too many kids these days are glued to screens. Exercise is important." It didn't take long for Karen Jensen to position herself as the boys' unexpected ally. She started advocating for youth engagement in neighborhood meetings, suggesting the HOA should encourage outdoor play rather than discourage it. "Children need space to thrive," she declared during one meeting, her voice laced with a pointed edge. "We should be supporting them, not treating them like criminals." Karen Whitmore was livid. "Are you kidding me? These kids are a nuisance. They've already cracked the sidewalk in front of my house." Karen Jensen smirked. "Sounds like normal wear and tear to me. Maybe you need to relax, Karen." The room gasped. No one had ever dared to tell Karen Whitmore to relax, and the look on her face was a mix of shock and fury. From that day on, the cul-de-sac became ground zero for the Karen's escalating feud. Karen Jensen went out of her way to encourage the kids, handing out water bottles and even setting up cones for bike obstacle courses. Meanwhile, Karen Whitmore doubled down on her crusade, printing flyers about the dangers of skateboarding and filing noise complaints with the HOA. The kids, of course, loved the chaos. They started playing louder and longer, turning every session into a performance for the Karens. Jake and Lucas even choreographed a Karen slam trick where they'd ollie over an imaginary clipboard. The neighborhood was split. Some parents sided with Karen Jensen, grateful for her support of the kids. Others, tired of the noise, backed Karen Whitmore. Tensions boiled over one weekend when Karen Whitmore tried to install "no skateboarding" signs at the entrance of the cul-de-sac, only for Karen Jensen to tear them down, claiming they weren't HOA approved. "I'm filing a complaint against you," Karen Whitmore shouted, shaking her clipboard. "Go ahead," Karen Jensen replied coolly. "I'll file one right back for unauthorized signage installation." The neighbors watched from their porches like spectators at a tennis match, heads turning back and forth as the Karens lobbed threats at each other. The conflict spiraled out of control. Karen Jensen proposed building a small skate ramp at the edge of the neighborhood park, but Karen Whitmore rallied her supporters to block the proposal, claiming it would devalue property. Karen Jensen retaliated by sponsoring a neighborhood sports day, complete with skateboarding demonstrations and bike races. On the day of the event, Karen Whitmore arrived with a whistle and started writing citations for every infraction she could spot. Kids riding on the grass, bikes parked on the sidewalk, someone spilling a soda. Karen Jensen responded by leading a round of applause for every trick the boys pulled off, glaring at Karen Whitmore the whole time. By the end of the day, the cul-de-sac looked like a war zone, with angry parents, cheering kids, and two Karens locked in a staring contest that could have melted steel. It all came to a head when Karen Whitmore tried to ban outdoor sports entirely through an emergency HOA vote. Karen Jensen countered by demanding a community referendum, insisting the neighborhood had a right to decide. At the meeting, neighbors shouted over each other, accusing both Karens of dragging the community into chaos. Someone stood up and yelled, "This is about kids playing. How did we let it come to this?" Finally, one of the kids, my youngest Lucas, stood up and said, "If you guys hate us so much, we'll stop playing. But it's really sad that grown-ups can't even let us have fun." That silenced the room, leaving both Karens red-faced. When Karen Whitmore's proposal to ban outdoor activities reached the HOA board, I held my breath, half expecting the small group of weary neighbors to side with her relentless campaign. After all, Karen Whitmore had built a legacy of instilling fear and order among the residents. But the tides had shifted since Karen Jensen's arrival. The board members exchanged tired glances before delivering their verdict. "We can't restrict children from playing outside," declared Mrs. Thompson, a soft-spoken retiree who usually avoided conflict. "It's their neighborhood, too." Karen Whitmore's face twisted into a scowl. "So you're just going to let them destroy our peace?" "Perhaps," Mrs. Thompson continued, her voice growing stronger. "We need to find a way to coexist, rather than restrict." Karen Jensen couldn't hide her smug grin, clearly reveling in Karen Whitmore's defeat. "I agree. We should encourage healthy, active lifestyles." Though the HOA rejected the ban, the conflict between the Karens was far from over. With no outright victory for either side, the neighborhood found itself caught in a tug-of-war between competing visions of control and freedom. Refusing to be outdone, Karen Jensen seized the opportunity to propose a community project, a new playground at the park's edge, complete with a designated skate zone and biking trails. "It will give the kids a safe place to play and keep the cul-de-sac peaceful," she pitched at the next HOA meeting, distributing glossy pamphlets featuring cheerful, well-behaved children. Karen Whitmore was incensed. "A skate park? Next you'll want graffiti walls and drum circles. This is a neighborhood, not an urban jungle," Karen Jensen countered with a dazzling smile. "Would you rather they play in the streets, Karen? Maybe Mr. Puddles could use a little exercise, too." The debate ignited a wildfire of opinions. Neighbors gathered in impromptu groups on sidewalks, debating the merits of a playground versus preserving the tranquil atmosphere they had once cherished. The Karens took their campaigns door to door. Karen Whitmore, clutching Mr. Puddles for dramatic effect, warned of the impending chaos that would accompany a playground. "Think of the noise, the strangers it will attract." Meanwhile, Karen Jensen organized a playground rally, complete with petitions, lemonade stands run by kids, and a presentation filled with statistics on childhood health and wellness. Even I found myself signing in support, partly because of the puppy dog eyes my sons gave me, and partly to see Karen Whitmore finally lose a battle. The neighborhood was now divided into two camps. One, the peacekeepers, backing Karen Whitmore, believing that a quiet neighborhood was the hallmark of a safe, pleasant community. Two, the playground pioneers, championed by Karen Jensen, pushing for the construction of a play area that would foster community and provide a haven for the neighborhood kids. After weeks of campaigning, arguments, and even a brief ridiculous stint where Karen Whitmore tried to prove the dangers of playgrounds by constructing a rickety DIY slide in her backyard, resulting in Mr. Puddles tumbling down and yipping indignantly, the HOA called for a final vote. In a surprising turn, the majority voted in favor of the playground, albeit with strict rules about operating hours and noise levels. It was a rare moment of unity, facilitated by the shared exasperation with both Karens. The new playground, modest but welcoming, became a symbol of compromise. The kids were thrilled, racing to try out the skate zone while parents chatted on new benches, finally feeling a sense of community rather than conflict. With the playground completed, the two Karens found themselves without a direct battlefield. Karen Whitmore begrudgingly accepted the new normal, limiting her outbursts to the occasional snide remark about uncontrolled hooligans. Karen Jensen, on the other hand, shifted her focus to organizing bake sales and dog-walking groups, subtly reminding everyone of her influence. Though they never formally declared a truce, a peculiar balance settled over Oakwood Pines. The Karens continued their passive-aggressive sparring, side-eye glances, unsubtle whispers, and the occasional HOA policy debate, but the neighborhood had grown used to it. And as for me and my boys, we enjoyed the playground's skate zone, laughing as Jake and Lucas taught their friends tricks. The sound of their wheels clattering on pavement had gone from a source of conflict to a comforting rhythm of community life. The Karens still loomed over the neighborhood like opposing weather fronts, but Oakwood Pines had learned how to weather their storms, together and maybe just a little stronger for it.